And I think there's a huge benefit to going into a race where your expectations are a little bit reserved, and having a 2:24:30 marathon PR prior to that, going into the race, like I didn't have these huge expectations. I wasn't really aiming for like a 2:18. I went out slightly more conservative, and even like the entire race, there was never a point in my mind where I was like, that's the mark you're gonna beat. The last 10K of the race is the hardest 10K. Like you feel good, and then mile 20 hits, and all of a sudden it's like a whole new race. So like, that's about the point I'm at.
Pickle juice, yay or nay?
No.
Welcome, everyone, back to our Meet the Team podcast. It is your racing team managers. I'm Heidi Allen, and this is
Bryce Brooks.
And we're here today with Adam. And I don't want to butcher your last name. Is it Vadeboncoeur?
That was pretty dang close. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that's about as close as most people get. Vadeboncoeur. But yeah, you did really well.
Yes. Awesome.
Nice
where does that come from?
I think it's French Canadian. It comes from my wife. It's not my last name.
Oh,
I took hers when we got married like 6 years ago. Mine was Olson, Olson, far easier to say.
But you upgraded to a unique name. I like it. Well, we wanted to bring you on and kind of get to know you a little bit better. So if you want to just give us like a little background on how you got into running. Did you run in high school? Give us the lowdown. Then we'll kind of dive more into your running career.
Sure. I've been running more or less pretty much my whole life. Even in like elementary school when we ran the mile in gym, that was always like one of my favorite days, which everyone would always kind of swear about. But I think it was either fourth or fifth grade. I think I ran a 6-minute mile in elementary school and kind of just enjoyed running since. I did some like summer camps through middle school. Our middle school never had like a track team or a track club. I feel like some people's did, and I was always surprised and jealous about that. Ours never did. I ran in high school. I did cross country and track. I debated and thought about some other sports. Friends that were on the football team, and they always kind of chatted with me about maybe joining that. I tried wrestling for like 2 practices and I hated it. Just not my arena for sure. I did swim team my freshman year. Also, like, never been a really great swimmer. Running's just always kind of been the one that gives me the most like positive feedback, and I get the most joy out of it. It doesn't feel forced at all. It just feels like a very natural way to have fun. So I ran through high school. Was like naturally pretty decent, but kind of messed around a little bit too much in high school, partied a little bit too much, wasn't very focused. So I kind of just like rode off the natural talent a little bit and didn't put much effort in outside of that. So I did okay for where I was at. Didn't have any plans of going to a 4-year college. I was pretty convinced of what I wanted to do after high school. So I went to a tech school. So I did not run in college at all. And kind of that was probably the one time of my life where I had a little bit of a gap in running. It was kind of the college days. I did help coach a team for a little bit. So I stayed kind of with a foot in the door and chatted with runners and such, but myself personally wasn't running all that much. I got into like a big rock climbing phase in college. Yeah. I lived a mile from the climbing gym. I got a job at the climbing gym. All my friends were climbers. So like there was probably like a 2 or 3 year stint there where all my time was spent at a climbing gym. Whether I was working, climbing, route setting, or hanging out with climbers, like that was it. So that was super fun. I do miss those days a little bit, and I would love to get back into rock climbing at some point in life.
Did you grow up in Colorado, and is that where you were climbing?
Sorry, that was probably an important context there. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. Okay. And ironically, did a ton of rock climbing in Madison, Wisconsin. And we traveled a bit from there. We did a little bit of outdoor climbing at like Devil's Lake. And we'd go down to like Red River Gorge, and we'd go down to Arkansas and climb down there. Horseshoe Canyon Ranch was one of our favorite places to go in Arkansas. And then when I moved out to the mountains in like my mid-20s, I haven't really climbed much since. I've gone into a gym occasionally, but haven't done any outdoor rock climbing
Yeah,
since.
you live by so many great climbing spots. It's
Yeah.
kind of funny you come out to the West where climbing's renowned out here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really silly fact about me, but obsessed with climbing when I lived in the Midwest where there's like no mountains and very limited outdoor climbing. And ever since I moved out here, I haven't really been into it. But it is on my list whenever I have a little bit more free time. I would love to get back into rock climbing someday. But I feel like as a runner, your feet are so important. And anytime I like dabble in rock climbing and I shove my feet in the climbing shoes, I'm like, this is really bad for my
This is
feet.
terrible.
And I'm like, this is not gonna. If I injure myself in the gym from putting on these silly shoes, I'm gonna be so mad at myself. So I have kind of avoided it partly because of that reason.
So I have to interject. You live in Boulder now,
Yes.
and I know that there's the Flatirons there, which I feel like is this unique hybrid of trail running and rock climbing. And I am curious if you find yourself on the Flatirons a lot.
We hike to kind of like the base of the Flatirons. There's a really famous hike that a lot of people do when they come to Boulder from Chautauqua Park. It's called the Royal Arch. Um, and we've hiked that a bunch of times. I personally have never climbed to the Flatirons though. Jane on the team goes like daily, I think. And they make it look so casual. And to somebody who's a rock climber and a runner like Jane, it probably feels crazy casual. But people definitely get themselves in trouble on that because people like Jane make it look so easy. And then people are like, I'm just going to go out and do that as a bucket list thing. And they get themselves into some trouble. And I also have my foot in the door in kind of like rescue, safety, emergency response teams and stuff like that. And you hear a lot of stories of people needing to be rescued from the Flatirons.
Interesting.
I have not done it
Um,
yet. I would love to one day, but maybe I'll have to go out with a very experienced crew the first time.
I've been out on the Flatirons a couple times, and I mean I'm also an avid rock climber. I've been climbing for almost 9 years, so I feel like definitely having that experience is helpful. But from your experience, being a volunteer firefighter, you probably see a lot of inexperienced people getting out there on the rock, and I've definitely wondered like how many rescues there are on the Flatirons.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like constant, but frequent enough where I feel like it could be a good PSA for some people if they're not experienced rock climbers and hikers and that sort of thing to not. I feel like it's kind of underrated of the level of difficulty that it could be for the average human.
Definitely.
So as a volunteer firefighter, are there any have you had to help like hikers in need of rescue before? Is that something that you've done in Colorado?
I haven't. No. A lot of those, especially something like the Flatirons, would be a special certification to go do. It's like I think it's called like a high angle rescue certification. You just need to make sure you actually like know what you're doing with ropes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, gotcha.
Which I don't have that certification. And also the district I'm in. I'm out in Lyons, Colorado. We definitely have some areas where hikers get in trouble. But it's more just like they're lost on the trails or something like that. We don't have any terrain quite like the Flatirons where it's like as inviting and tempting for people to go out and scale them. So we don't have that as often. We get a lot of like mountain bike crashes, and we've got a trail system called Hall Ranch that has a pretty long technical rock garden, steep rock garden that a lot of mountain bikers go over the bars on. So we get a lot of calls there. Mountain bikers more so than hikers.
Yeah, got it.
So as a volunteer firefighter, are you required to keep up with like the same like physical demands that a typical firefighter does? I know that they're always in the gym like working out and trying to stay on top of it. Is that also required?
Yep. Yeah, we um if you're doing like day shifts, the crew that's on shift is working out every day. That's kind of like a part of the daily schedule is for everyone to work out together, but it's also heavily encouraged to for everyone to stay fit outside of the station as well on their own. And then there are depending on what certifications you have, there's like annual tests that you have to do to just ensure that you're maintaining a specific fitness level. I just did last weekend, so 2 weekends ago. There's like a wildland test that you have to do every year to maintain your wildland red card, where you put a 45-pound pack on and you just have to do 3 miles in 45 minutes. So anyone who's doing wildland stuff has to do that every year.
Awesome.
And in addition to being a volunteer firefighter, you also are juggling 2 jobs right now. How does that lend itself to training? How do you navigate that? It seems like a lot of your time is spent not running right now.
Yeah, I mean, my training is going decently well, for the most part, other than kind of trying to navigate my right knee that kind of keeps ballooning up after big hard efforts and races, which I'm like kind of starting to figure out. I'm seeing a PT this week for that, but I've found in the past where I've always thought like if I have way more time in my schedule to train and focus on recovery and all that kind of stuff, that everything will go perfectly smooth and easy.
Yeah,
I've found when I have like too much time or more time, like you sometimes get yourself into more trouble, and you either like overcook or you're just focused on potentially the wrong things. So I don't think like the actual training time itself is suffering too much. It'd be nice to have a little bit more free time, but I do think like the brain fog that you get from it does affect the sharpness of your body.
sure.
And just juggling a handful of things right now is probably unideal for just kind of keeping your brain sharp and keeping your muscles kind of like reactive and feeling fresh. It is amazing how much fatigue your body can feel when your brain is tired from thinking and thinking too much. So you mentioned the 2 jobs. I'm hopefully slimming down to 1 job in volunteer firefighting, which should, time wise, I'll probably still commit the same amount of time to those things that I am now, but my brain will feel a little bit clearer not having to juggle that many schedules and communicating with that many people and coordinating and that sort of thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think as busy as you are, I don't think anyone would say that your training looks like it's suffering.
Yeah,
I
didn't mean
mean,
that at all. Yeah.
your ultra sign up, you've got some really impressive results. And like this past weekend, you just ran the Mad City 50K and got third, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That was amazing. I think your time was 2 hours and 58 minutes. Is that right? Or
253, 50 something,
253.
53 or something like that.
Amazing. How are you feeling after that? And was that the performance that you were hoping for? Or give us a little rundown on that race.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the race went better than expected. I mentioned briefly a moment ago, my right knee has been kind of ballooning a little bit after hard efforts and either big races or even like some workouts. It's been kind of unpredictable how my knee's going to feel after those things. So I haven't felt the most confident committing to things or, post workouts. If my knee feels like crap, it's hard to feel super optimistic of what the next week's going to look like or what the next race is going to look like. To be honest, like the last few workouts I did leading up to Mad City, just felt kind of forced. I mentioned my brain's kind of just feeling foggy and my body's not feeling as sharp. So I wasn't feeling super optimistic. I'm from Madison originally, and that's where the race
Right.
was. And I didn't really tell anybody I was going back to race because I was
Oh,
kind of like, I don't
really?
know if I really want many people coming out because I have no clue how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And the last thing I wanted was like a bunch of friends to spend their Saturday out there watching me blow up and walk it in.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So I didn't really tell anybody I was coming back or racing that lived in Madison. But the race ended up going far better than expected. I don't know if it's, a decent taper or just having a little bit more experience in the distance or knowing the course really well. Probably a combination of all of those things. I went out the first lap. It's a 5-lap course. So 5 by 10K laps through the Madison Arboretum. I went out the first lap with the front crew,
Yep.
and it was a little bit spicier than I kind of wanted my pace to be. And so I made the good call of like letting them go and reeling it back after the first 10K to a pace that felt a little bit more confident. And so that, I think that's just a reflection of doing that distance a little bit more and knowing my body and kind of knowing what's coming and knowing the course and the hills on the course. And so that, I think, was a really good call that played into the race going decently. And it didn't end up being a PR, but it was far closer to a PR than I thought I could get, given my fitness and how training's been going. But it was
Yeah,
great.
interesting. On the men's side, there was Charlie Lawrence out there, who's world record 50-mile holder, real legit runner. So it sounds like you went with him for maybe the first loop, and
Mhm.
then did he take some folks with him on that blister pace?
There was one other guy with them. They were going around like there was like the occasional 520 mile. The pace was ranging between like 520s and 525s, which realistically I was think like if I ended up averaging 529s, that would be a PR for me. And so that's kind of where I was setting my bar. I was like trying to hang out around 529s and just pace it
Yep.
really smart. So that first lap, I think we haven't ended up averaging like 524 or 525 for the first lap, and so I pulled it back, kind of just preemptively before my body was saying like, "Hey, this is way too hard."
Yeah.
Um, I think had I run that first lap a little bit smarter, those 529s probably would have felt a little bit easier throughout the race. But I'm glad I pulled it back when I did. But yeah, Charlie Lawrence is a local Boulder guy as well. We train together occasionally.
Oh, you
So
do? That's cool.
we talked about the race quite a bit leading into it. I don't think his training was quite where he wanted it to be either leading into that race. And so he was playing it really, really smart. If he's feeling sharp, a lot of times he'll go big. He'll swing real big early on in the race. But I think since his training was a little bit abbreviated as well, he was playing it in his perspective. He was playing it smart at that pace. But the other guy that was with him belonged up there. He's run really fast marathons and is a really talented runner as well. It just didn't end up being his day, and he ended up pulling out.
Okay. Yeah, gotcha.
And I have to ask because I noticed on your Strava that from like mile 15 on, your heart rate was like 200 beats per minute. And I just need to know if that's accurate or not.
I highly doubt it. I feel like my wrist-based heart rate, I never pay attention to it. It's on my watch. I should probably just figure out a way to turn it off. But I'll go on like a super easy run and it'll say 180, and I'll go out and do like a big tempo workout and it'll say 180. It's always like if I'm running, it's always just through the roof. So I would highly doubt that I was sustaining.
I mean, that'd be impressive if you maintained a 200 beat per minute for 15 miles. So hard to steal right there.
I feel like Aaron called me out on that on Strava.
He did.
It's not accurate. I'd be shocked if it was.
All right. But yeah, I mean, so congratulations on that race. I know that we were all impressed with it. Kind of want to touch on some other of your previous achievements. Last year, I believe you earned a spot on Team USA and ran at the IAU 50K World Championships, which were held in Hyderabad, India.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about how that was? Have you ever competed internationally before? And what was it like wearing the Team USA kit?
Yeah, it was really cool. That was my first time qualifying for Team USA. That was 2023, so we're already almost 2 years out from that. That was the same race was my qualifier. I ran Mad City 50K 2 Aprils ago. And that was where my PR was from. The lead up, fitness wise, the lead up to that workouts were way better. There was way more weeks of like nice high mileage that was feeling good. And so yeah, I qualified at Mad City 2 years ago. Um, Jumped onto Team USA. That was my first time racing there. And yeah, Hyderabad, India was a wild place to race. I've never raced internationally before. Still is the only international race I've done. So the logistics of traveling internationally and then specifically traveling to India and racing in India were pretty unique. There's a lot to think about there. Probably one of the bigger things is just like navigating jet lag, which I had never really done before. So how long are you going to get out there beforehand so that your body has time to acclimate and get used to that time zone? And then the other big one that everybody was trying to kind of figure out what they were going to do for that was a big unknown was just food and eating leading into
Mm-hmm.
an ultra. Um, Obviously street food's out of the question. We're not going to eat that, but like, what is the hotel going to offer for food and that sort of thing?
Yeah,
We
totally.
all have our pretty like regimented eating diets the week leading into a race, and you're not probably going to get that in India, and the grocery stores probably aren't going to offer you the same things you're used to getting here or even in Europe if you're racing in Europe. So that was probably the hardest one to navigate and plan for, just because you really didn't know what to expect.
Did you bring your own nutrition for the actual race, or is that something? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, for races for quite a while now, I haven't relied on aid stations at all. I'll either carry everything that I'm gonna get, and then have my crew, which historically has purely been my wife at every race, hand me stuff at some point during the race to replenish. But I just like to be controlled about that and bring my own stuff and rely on my nutrition instead of what's going to be at an aid station.
Yeah. I also remember that day being not cold.
And it's not cold there.
No.
It was in November, but it got pretty toasty. It gets very humid there. I remember we were warming up at like 6:30 in the morning, and I was just like drenched. And I went over to my wife at before the race, and I was like, I'm gonna need way more salt tablets for this one. Like,
Oh
I'm
man,
like
yeah.
already drenched for my 1 mile little warm up. Is gonna get hot, and you knew that in the. I mean, it was noticeable in the race. Everyone kind of started to melt around the same time.
Yeah.
It was warming up. Probably about 20 miles into the race, everybody's pace started to really pull back. The heat was just turning up. The humidity was turning up. And if you were to look at like every racer's times throughout that, the last 10 miles were significantly slower for the most part than the first 20, which that's pretty typical for a lot of races, but that one even more noticeable. And then the AQI, they were like celebrating that it was only 180. They were like, "You guys are lucky. You lucked out." We're like,
Whoa.
in Boulder, we don't really do anything outside if it ever reaches 180. We're all like hiding indoors. But they were pretty excited about the fact that it was that low for them.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. That's wild. Did you plan any time before or after the race to explore India at all?
Yeah, my wife and I spent almost 10 days exploring India after the race. We didn't do a ton of exploring beforehand. We saw a few things in town in Hyderabad leading into the race, but I didn't want to be out in the heat and the air quality on my feet that much prior to the race. But yeah, we spent about 10 days or so. We traveled to a few different areas in India. We went to like Munnar, which is a little bit higher up in the mountains, a lot less populated, more like kind of very like woodsy, high mountain,
Oh
high
yeah.
alpine kind of feel. Munnar is actually like a huge tree or tea plantation area. That was really really cool. Um, we went to a town kind of like on the ocean called Aleppi, which has really cool like river canals all the way through it, and a lot of people travel by boat all the like
Oh
everywhere
yeah.
they go. And we actually stayed overnight on a houseboat there. That was really neat. Um, yeah, so we ended up traveling around for about 10 days afterwards, which was really cool.
That's really fun. Um, so other than the 50K World Champs, you also broke the 218 marathon barrier. What marathon was that at and when? And tell us a little bit about that.
So that was Houston in January after 50K champs. when we were out in India, I was chatting with some of the other Team USA folks about Olympic trials and if I was going to try to sneak into Olympic trials last minute, because 50K world champs were like 3 weeks prior to the last marathon you could run to make the trials, which was CIM in December. And honestly, prior to that, I hadn't run a road marathon on its own since 2019.
Okay.
And that was the only road marathon I had done. That was my first one in 2019. And after that, I kind of got into trails a little bit more and ultra stuff. So on paper, my marathon PR was 2:24:30. And it sounded wild to say that I thought I could take 6.5 minutes off my PR on paper. That seemed pretty arrogant, especially 3 weeks after 50K Worlds and after traveling in India. One of my teammates was like, "Hey, I found you a spot if you want to take it to CIM." And it still would have been costly to go out to California and try to go for it, with the sole purpose, like the only reason I would have rushed and tried to do it was to try to get that OTQ. And it just seemed like I was setting myself up to kind of be disappointed and bummed out. But I was feeling pretty fit at the time, so we signed up for Houston, which was like a month and a half later. So I got a few more weeks to kind of recover and then train back up and try to put down a good marathon. And I think there's a huge benefit to going into a race where your expectations are a little bit reserved, and having a 2:24:30 marathon PR prior to that, going into the race, like I didn't have these huge expectations. I wasn't really aiming for like a 2:18. I went out slightly more conservative. And even like the entire race, there was never a point in my mind where I was like, that's the mark I'm going to beat. I was just kind of like running my race to what felt good. And the entire time I knew I was on a pace to run a PR, which was really like confidence inspiring. And I was just happy with that. So I was just running the whole race, feeling good and feeling confident. Nutrition wise, I felt like I did really well. And the whole race, I was kind of like, I had the women's lead group kind of in my sights, but like way off in the distance. And I must have been running like a second or two per mile faster. And so I was just like very ever so slightly like reeling them in over the course of like from like mile 10 to mile 18. And then by mile 18, 19, I was like on the women's lead group. And they have the truck with the camera that's like showing them the whole time and recording them the whole time. And I was wearing this bright yellow Aravaipa team kit, so I was like very noticeable. And I had this silly situation in my head that's unrealistic, but like somebody was probably watching that feed and was like, I'm a very noticeable guy in this bright yellow kit. And if I make the move and I pass the women's lead crew, and then because everyone, like the last 10K of the race is the hardest 10K. Like you feel good. And then mile 20 hits and all of a sudden it's like a whole new race. So like, that's about the point I'm at. I'm like, I feel like this is a daunting point to like turn things up and pass this group and go past. And somebody's going to see me just get spit out the back 2 miles later. And they're like, oh, there goes the guy in the yellow shirt, just like dying. And so like when I made the decision to pass the group, I was just like, I got to hold this and stick it. And I actually ended up running close to a 10K PR at the end of that race. I think with this like just weird motivation in my head to not let that crew catch back up to me. So I am glad that I didn't run CIM a month prior. What ended up happening, I ran a 2:17:56 chip time. So I like barely snuck under there, which I don't think I would have done a month prior, being fatigued from Worlds and traveling in India and stuff. I don't think I would have done that. And I'm kind of glad that wasn't actually like a qualifying race. It was like just outside the qualifying window, because my gun time was 2:18:06 because I didn't cross the line until like 10 seconds after the gun went off. And I'm pretty certain they go off gun time.
Oh, gotcha.
So I still think like I ran under 2:18, but if they would have gone off gun time, I don't think they would have let me in. And I think I would have been pretty frustrated if like that was like the weird caveat that didn't get me out there. And also, I think I would have had probably the slowest seed time at Olympic trials, which would have been cool to go, but going out there with like the slowest seed time would have been an interesting race.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There is another one I wanted to ask about. It's the first ultra listed on your ultra sign up. It's also an FKT, the back 40 mile in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about that and what inspired that one?
So I was living in Bentonville at the
Oh,
time.
you were?
Yep.
Okay.
We lived in Bentonville, which is like right near the back 40 trails. And Bentonville is kind of where I really started getting into ultra running. There's just so many trails there. They've got hundreds and hundreds of miles of mountain bike trails because the town's obsessed with cycling,
Yeah,
which worked out for me because I just run all the mountain bike trails. I like mountain biking too, but I really got into longer running there. The running scene in Bentonville is kind of like in the shadow of the cycling scene just because it doesn't have quite as
sure.
much money, but it's actually a really good running scene there. And I signed up for the back 40 miler, which is two 20-mile loops that kind of like do a big circle up in the northwest Arkansas. They dip into Missouri for a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
So I was going to do that race on my 30th birthday in December. And so as a training run going into that, I just ran the entire loop as a training run.
Uh-huh.
I had run it a couple weeks prior with like almost no nutrition and bonked terribly. And I was like, well, I got to figure this out with some much better nutrition. So the FKT was actually going back, doing it a second time with a little bit smarter
Oh,
nutrition as a
got it.
training run. And I didn't actually submit it as an FKT. I don't think I knew what the FKT was at the
Oh,
time.
you're listed on the website now.
Yeah. A guy that lives there a couple of years ago, like 2 years ago or so,
Yep.
was going for that FKT. And he was like, hey, man, I kind of want to do this honestly. And I noticed on Strava that this, like, you currently would hold the record, but you haven't submitted it. And he submitted it on my behalf, which was really
Oh,
cool.
That's
that is
cool.
pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's the only FKT I think I officially have on the FKT site. And I didn't, some other guy was super nice and he was like, hey, I don't want to get it knowing that it's not actually the fastest time out there. And so he put my name on there.
That's a pretty cool
That's cool.
backstory.
Yeah. So looking ahead, do you have any future goals or races that you have in mind?
Um, so I'm gonna, like, after Mad City this past weekend, my plan was to kind of like try to get a handle on my right knee and get that feeling more confident so I can have some kind of bigger training blocks and more confident training blocks and feel good about putting my name on start lists. So I'm going to work on that for a little bit, but a little bit farther out, Tunnel Hill is one of
Oh,
my top choices for the fall if that works out. I've heard some rumors of potentially a new race distance for that this year that might happen. And if not, it's the 50-mile national championships. So I wouldn't do the 100-mile. I don't think I'm quite there yet for how far I want to go, but Tunnel Hill is very, very high. And then I kind of have just some fun personal projects that I want to do this fall. I haven't really seen anybody else that's done it, and it doesn't really matter either way. I just kind of want to do it for fun, but I want to run the entire Peak to Peak Highway from Estes Park to Blackhawk, Colorado.
oh,
It traverses kind of from those two high mountain towns,
uh-huh.
just kind of undulating the whole way. And you rack up a decent amount of climbing, but it's like 55 miles, and the entire time it's just like mind blowing views. People ride it all the time. It's a really popular like cycling route,
Yep.
but it sounds really fun to run.
Oh, that's
That's
interesting.
cool.
That's super
Yep.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, maybe somebody's gonna have to submit that route to FKT on your behalf. Make it official. That's awesome. I did want to ask a little bit about nutrition. Um, it seems like that was one of the pieces early on that was holding you back a little bit. And
Mhm.
then it's something that, I mean, following you on like social, you're sponsored by Carbs now, which seems to be working really well for you. Can you tell about kind of like the evolution, your thought process behind nutrition and how it plays into your success recently?
Yeah. I talked about like my first marathon in 2019 and my first ultra marathon that was also in 2019, that 40 miler. Both nutrition wise were pretty abysmal. I think I was drinking just like standard electrolyte mix that would be like, I don't know, 20, 30 calories in a bottle, something like that. And then maybe one or two like 90 calorie gels. So both those races, like towards the end, just fatigued and really hit a wall. It took me a little while to really figure out the nutrition side of things, like mid race and also training wise too. But a couple of years ago, I think it's my only DNF as far as I know, but Bandera 100K was kind of my first attempt at 100K in 2021. Bonked super hard. Again, nutrition was just like real bad. And it really just like that race specifically was like, I got to figure this out. I hated DNFing. It wasn't a good feeling. Nobody likes DNFing. But after that one, I was like, I got to start eating way more. I just like totally ran out of energy and legs were just shot. So I started playing around with like high carb drink mix and that sort of stuff. And it was amazing, like instantly how much better it made me feel. The first time I used it, I went like to the limit of what they claim you can put in a bottle, and my stomach was just like rolling. So, you know, if you haven't played around with that, anyone that's, you know, thinking about playing around with it, start with like a smaller dose of what they say you can put in there and gradually work your way up because it does take a tolerance. But it was amazing kind of starting to play around with a high carb mix in bottles and being able to get that much nutrition in just from fluids. And so like for a couple of years up until being sponsored by Carbs, I was primarily just fueling off fluids and doing like a really high calorie carb mix in bottles and just swapping them out pretty frequently. So like the Ram Party 50 miler that I did 2 years ago, that was all liquid carbs.
Interesting.
And it works pretty well for me. It's really low effort. You can just, your bottle gets smaller as you're drinking. And I just kind of, I've kind of trained myself to hold a soft flask in my hand on any run basically longer than an hour. And now I don't really even think about it as much of an issue.
Yeah, it's super interesting, the evolution. Like I'm still on that journey.
Yeah.
But
so now I use a balance of like a lot of liquid carbs and a lot of liquid calories mixed with carbs gels. And Carbs Fuel, the brand, offers both. And honestly, like there are some good options out there, but what makes this brand truly unique and what I like about them a lot is the fact that they do a 200 calorie gel for $2, which when you start comparing that across the market is the best deal you'll find
for sure.
Anywhere. I went on a run the other day after work and forgot to bring fuel for that run, and I didn't want to go home, and so I bought some from a store, and I was like, this is insane how much I just spent for nutrition on this run. We're like, even if I went and bought, like I could have gotten so many more calories from Carbs Fuel for like half the price. And I was like, it's wild how good of a deal it is. And I really respect the fact that a brand is trying to make something more approachable and easier for people in a time where like the prices of shit is going through the roof and like it's wild. So the fact that Carbs Fuel does that it makes me really like proud to be a part of that brand. And then the other one is Ascent Protein is my other sponsor for like recovery and that sort of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, I use that too. Good stuff.
Nice.
Both are good stuff. Yeah, the carb, you got me on some of the carbs. I've been trying some of those lately on and off, and tasty.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of it's really sweet because it's got 200 calories and it's tiny little gel, so it's got to have a lot of sugar in there. So the first one you have, you're like, wow, that's really sweet, but you get used to it pretty fast. And now I really like it.
Pickle juice, yay or nay?
No, I had it once. It was actually after the first year I did Ram Party. I did it. I just did the marathon up around the actual reservoir.
Yep.
And after the race, I was looking terrible, and somebody handed me a little pickle juice shot after the race, and it didn't even go down. It hit the back of my throat, and I spit it right back out. I was like, "This is terrible." I like pickles, but I don't. I don't know how people do that in a
I
race.
just chug that stuff. I love pickle juice.
I can't
with
do
Adam.
it. It just nope.
Sometimes I'm at home and I'll just be like, what sounds good? Pickle juice. And I just go drink it.
I feel like if I wasn't in that state of like pure exhaustion, maybe I could tolerate it, but I still wouldn't crave it. Like I like pickles, but like nothing about pickle juice sounds that tempting ever.
That's all right. Everyone's got their own different thing.
Yep.
Controversial topic, yeah.
Yeah, pickle juice. All right, we have a couple of rapid fire questions and then we'll wrap up the interview. So just these like our one word-ish answers. What is your favorite pair of running shoes?
Ooh, the kind of the two better races I've done recently have been in the Hoka Silo X1s. So I'll say that.
Okay. And if you could go on a long run with anyone, who would it be and why?
Dead or alive?
Yeah.
All right. I heard that Robin Williams was a pretty stout runner in his time.
Yeah.
And that sounds like it would be a pretty incredible run to go on, both because Robin Williams seemed like an incredible human, and I think he'd just be laughing the entire time. But yeah, I think if you look up into his history, he was a pretty decent runner in like college and after college a little bit and stuff.
I like that.
Great
That's a good answer. Yeah. What is your go-to post-run meal?
Favorite would be like burritos. Anything wrapped in a tortilla.
Delicious. All right. And my last question, and this isn't a one-word answer, is what's one piece of advice that you would give to a newer runner?
I feel like this is probably what a lot of people would say, but just like enjoying the journey and figuring out like how to enjoy the process instead of focusing purely on results. Results are kind of a fleeting high. You do a really good race and you're super stoked by it, and then 2 days later you're like, that feeling's gone, and you're like, what's next? And so if really all you're doing is chasing those like really good results, you're not going to have that many moments of joy throughout like the whole running process. If you can just figure out how to enjoy the workouts and those long runs and all that kind of stuff, you're going to enjoy all of it. And if you end up having a bad race, you're not as sad about it. It's always sad to have a bad race, but you're not as wrecked by it. If you enjoyed every day leading up to that, then it doesn't feel so wasted. But yeah, if you're only chasing those big results and you didn't really enjoy the process along the way, then you're not going to have fun for most of it.
Well said.
Yep.
Agreed. You just got to enjoy what you're doing. I think most people have been saying that too. You got to love the sport. So,
Yep.
Well, thank you for joining us. Really enjoyed talking with you and getting to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
So, till next time.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Yeah.
See you guys.